What are the ramifications? Is this a game changer?
I don't think it's a game changer at all, because we're not at all in the configuration that was in 2013, because we should see what we saw actually today, that the strikes were neither what we call a saturation strike made to cripple the Syrian military forces, neither strikes aimed at degrading chemical weapons, because in both cases this airport is like a delivery facility. So they maybe destroyed 5 or 4 or 6 airplanes, which are Su-22s, very old airplanes. And we saw from the first videos that we have from Russian TV that there was not much damage done on the airport, actually. And from information we are having also, we know that the states notified Moscow, and Moscow most probably notified the Syrian regime, which evacuated most of its human power and some of its planes from the airport before the strikes, which is not the first actually, because we remember also in history that many strikes were made after telling the persons that are going to be hit. And a French example, for example, in the mid-80s was against the facility of Hezbollah in the mid-80s in Lebanon, and they were notified first, so they evacuated. So this is more of a diplomatic action aimed to deter, saying that the new administration in the United States is willing to use force in case Assad goes back to using one more time chemical weapons. But any military action like this one should be followed by diplomacy with a real clear plan. And up to this point, we don't know if the American administration has a real plan or a real strategy for Syria. And meanwhile, we see that the Russians, as the correspondent said, are creating their own leverage by suspending the confliction channel, which is the coordination of military action on Syrian air. So they stopped it, making the U.S. air campaign against, for example, jihadis more complicated.
Okay, so now let's go to what we, of course, have heard then from Washington, from President Trump himself. He puts the blame squarely on Assad, saying that he used chemical weapons in Tuesday's deadly attack. Why would Assad use chemical weapons?
It could seem, it could look irrational, but behind every violent political action there's some logic and some rationality. And the core message of this use by chemical weapons by the Syrian forces is addressed to its opponents in Syria, saying that he is still controlling the game, he can go as far as he wants, and so which gives them one of two choices. The first choice is for his opponents to go back to him and fight with him against jihadi groups, or to join jihadi groups. And we know that if they join jihadi groups, it'll be okay to kill everyone, which is happening in many cities in Syria, in Iraq, and in other places. Because there's an old Arab saying that the reasons of death can change, but the death is still the same. And so it's really local, addressed to his Syrian opponents. And on the other hand, he is putting the stakes much higher regarding Western democracies, proving in a way that they cannot do much to stop him, besides this kind of strike, which is like a red flag, or which is not they won't be able to change drastically the political game ongoing in Syria.
We've heard both from Syria as well from its ally Russia saying that this strike against the air base, that it will have an impact in the fight against the Islamic State group and other terror groups, saying that it's going to weaken things. Is that true?
That's the diplomatic game. It is true in a sense, because when the coordination, as I just said, in Syrian skies stops, it will make it more difficult for the U.S. Air Force to conduct strikes against jihadi groups. We shouldn't also forget that the Iraqi theater, where we see that the Americans are helping the Iraqi government, but also militias helped by Iran on the Iraqi scene, and all this, Iraq and Syria today are the same war theater. So it could have an impact impact. But I don't think that on the long term it would have an impact, because the focus is still on fighting jihadi groups, and this is just a kind of a warning for Assad not to go further. And to add just one more thing, if the message could have been much stronger, for example, if the US would have struck the presidential palace or official buildings in Damascus or elsewhere, or really, for example, important military facilities in Syria. But they chose to hit just this airport, destroy a few warplanes, and not to put real military pressure on the Assad regime as it was planned, for example, in 2013.